First up is Kathleen, and yeah, first glance, this looks like a good start, good proportions. I noticed you had trouble with the Boolean tool you mentioned, and yeah, really, Boolean's not a great way to cut holes in things. It's creates all these weird diagonal edges, and as you noticed, doesn't work some of the time. So what I would tend to do instead is use the multi-cut tool. So um, mesh tools, multi-cut tool, and probably be better if this one wasn't here also, but it's okay. I wonder if those are at the same height. So I'll hold down Shift to get a straight line. I mean, what I might do is actually, like my approach is if I didn't have these at all, I wonder if we still have the history on this. You can kind of back out of, it's a little tricky, these booleans. If I go into the attribute editor and start with boolean 16 and select and then delete and then wait a minute, where did all the rest of that stuff go? Select, delete. Oh, that got rid of all of them. Okay, that didn't work. All right, no big deal. So anyways, I was trying to undo the booleans, but it's not going to let me do that right now. So mesh tools, multi-cut tool, and I'll just hold down Shift and cut a line, straight through here. And it's hard to do once all these are in here. In fact, what I'll do is, just for this example, because I wouldn't do this probably after there's all these diagonal lines in there. Let's just make a new fresh building here. We'll just hold down D and V and middle mouse drag, snap that to the corner, and then hold down V and snap it to this corner and scale that to the length. And height and width of this. Alright, so now I have like this fresh cube. And I'm going to grab this one and I'll leave it in there, but I'll just use it as a template. I'll make a new layer and then reference it so it can't be selected. So now I can just select this one. And now I'll use the multi-cut tool, mesh tools, multi-cut tool. And if I hold down Shift, it will cut through the whole thing, sort of like a laser beam cutting through the entire surface, all sides of it. And oops, undo that. Okay, and if continue cutting the rest of them, but what we end up with is something like this with these nice neat lines that go all the way around. If I want to cut out a window, I can just select and delete that, cut it out. I could grab these edges around there, and if I want to give the window some thickness, I can go Shift, right mouse click, extrude edge, push that back, gives that some thickness. So I would kind of approach it more like that than using booleans, which give you all these, I turned on reference, crazy diagonal lines and sort of weird problems like you were having. So my advice would be to take a step back and do it more cleanly like that. And then of course all your windows will be sort of automatically aligned that way as well. And you can still move stuff around. Like if I, grab the verts of these, if I decide a window's not in the right place, whoops, I could move it up or down or, make those adjustments afterwards as well. Anyways, yeah, back to this. Nice job on the stairs. I think that's looking really good. And good job on this and really paying attention to all those pieces. And yeah, it's a good match overall. So yeah, keep going, keep adding the detail, adding the doors and windows and all that stuff. Some of the detail and the shapes of these columns would be nice. Yeah, good work so far. So this is Janesa, and yeah, looking really good. You've come a pretty long way. I think you've gone, beyond just blocking out, and that's good. So now, and the proportions are pretty good. I might say that it's a little longer in this direction, longer along and back that way, so you kind of pull that back a little bit. I would say these guys are too wide. I think they should be narrower, and this could be a bit thinner. What else? Door's looking pretty good. You could add a little door handle on there. It's nice you even added the barrel. You could add the kind of bands on the barrel if you want. You could add a little more detail on the deck. You could have this part on top and these sort of, you could see the kind of underneath the deck and these horizontal support beams there. So yeah, there's some stuff to add. If you want to go to the next level, you could add some curtains on the inside and have transparent windows. It'd be even better. But yeah, it's coming along really well. Next up is Stephanie, and yeah, you got some of the basic shapes in there, and pretty good job paying attention to proportions. I would say it's taller, at least this back part. If I look at this distance here and look at that distance there, it seems kind of a little taller. And then maybe this angle isn't quite so steep. The roof's a little flatter there, and you notice that it overhangs the edge here. Zoom in a little bit to help look at that. Yeah, overhangs. Obviously, adding these doors and the support beams on the doors, you could add some of these things like the barrel and some of these objects and these little stairs here. So I know we're not expecting a lot of detail yet. It's just a blocking stage, and yeah. So I think you got the basic shapes. I don't think there's too much to go besides kind of a proportions check before you continue. Maybe the deck actually is pretty thick on this one, so you might even be able to go a little bit thicker. And I think it comes all the way up to the bottom of the door there. I think there's only a very small gap there, and I don't think there's any of the front of the building there. So I think that would connect there. But yeah, good start, and keep going. Next up is Tess, and yeah, a really good start on this. I think you've got a pretty good sense of proportions, although I would say that this extends out a little bit longer here. I think that distance could be a little wider if you look at the distance between the door and this flap window thing, whereas yours is quite tight there. I think this is a little bit taller, maybe. That's not so bad, but and yeah, I might go with squared off columns rather than the round ones. And I think maybe if this angles down more, that might be better. So yeah, just look at some proportion adjustments. You could add some roundness to this shape, would look nice. And add the signs, and you could add like a bend to these. Did you combine this? It looks like maybe not. But what you could do is, let's say you want to add some, I'll look at this from the top. If you want to add some detail, I might do Mesh Tools, Multicut tool, and I'll just hold down Shift and just cut straight through this object. So I have a little bit more to work with now. That didn't turn out so great, but it's a little tricky since it's one continuous object. But anyways, the idea being that you could, for example, take this edge, I'll just select that, Shift select here, and maybe move it down a little bit like that. Select one, Shift double click the other, and probably go down a little. Anyways, you'll have to get in there and fine tune it a little bit. But the idea is add some imperfections so it's not so, everything's not so geometrical. And I think that'll help the look of it as well. Next up is Morgan, and yeah, good start on this. You got the basic shapes going, which is good. I think that obviously you'll add some of the detail like the doors. I think that these windows, it's good that you got them small, but I think they're a little high. Look how low those windows are to the bottom, so you might want to pull those down a bit to match that up. The doors maybe a touch taller or more narrow, and this looks much too narrow where the word Marshall would be. I think that would be a lot wider. And overall the building looks like it could be wider and maybe flatter. So one thing I recommend is doing something like taking a window. You can make like a little cube or something and then use that as a standard of measurement, and then say like how many windows high is the building, and then compare it in here. If this is a window, you could do it in Photoshop and get real exact, but let's say that's one window high, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe at the building 6 windows high, and then you go, well, how many from the door to this edge, how many from the door to that edge, and total width, so you use something as a measuring stick and then make sure everything else is accurate relative to that. It's a somewhat simpler building compared to some of the other ones, so look for the finer details to add. Like you'll notice there's this top roof surface and the one below, there's these little support beam sticks coming out the side, and again here, obviously the window frames and the door frames. You've already got the barrel, which is good, but you can put the bands on the barrel. So, look for those smaller details since there's a little less to work with on this building. But first, make sure you get your proportions correct. Next up is Jasmine, and yeah, good start. You've got the basic shapes in there. I think you need another look at the proportions. I think this is sort of taller and skinnier, and look at where the roof hits here, and look how low it hits there. So I think you kind of want to pull that up, and this probably overlaps too much right here compared to that. The window frames, maybe they're just placeholders now, but they're very thick, so you'll want to go with thinner ones and try to match these shapes. Add in the deck here to the front and these railings. You can add these kind of corner pieces as well. It's a nice detail to put in there. So yeah, I think the first thing is to get the proportions a little more dialed in. As I recommended in the previous video, you can use pick one thing in the image as a measuring stick, like a window, and then try try to get that looking about what you expect it to be, at least proportional to itself. And then you could say like, well, how many windows high is this? And you can do it in Photoshop if you want, but let's say it's like, and that's one there, so that's 2, and then 3, 4, 5, maybe 6.5, maybe 7 total high or something like that. Anyways, you can do it more accurately than that, but I'm just duplicating this just to get ballpark. 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I might have been off on my count, but it probably wasn't that far off. So that tells me this, this thing could be a lot higher, perhaps. And then you could use that same whatever it is measuring stick and measure this distance and that distance, and if you have one thing, how high the roof line comes in compared to that. If you have one thing as a standard and everything's correct relative to that, then the whole image will look good together. So yeah, kind of take a fix at the proportions, take a pass at fixing the proportions, and then maybe the whole thing looks a little narrow. Maybe this, yeah, also I think this distance here, if you look at from here to there, I think that's a bit narrow. I think you would widen that a bit. Next up is Catalina, and yeah, this is looking really good. Got a lot of detail on there. It seems like you're paying attention to the proportions for the most part. I think there's some adjustments. I think your columns are much too thick compared to these. And I think that the middle part is more round, whereas the bottom is squared off. Maybe the top is squared off, but I think this middle part is more of a cylinder. And yeah, something went a little funny with this shape here. Oh, I see how you've done that. You might, rather than using a half sphere for something like that, if you're going to do it that way, I'd be more inclined to say use a half cylinder, so that it's flat in front. If I hold down R and click, I can do, oh, not R, sorry. Pull down E and click, I can do discrete rotate, and that will get it to rotate at 15-degree increments. So anyways, you can see where I'm going with this, where if we select the bottom faces off of this, you can see how that might work better for what you're going for here than a half sphere, which is all rounded, if that's going to be that shape. Yeah, and you'll need that top piece as well, which actually, while I've got this open, what I might do for that is if I grab this face and shift double click on that face, then I can do shift right mouse click extrude face and move these out a little bit like that, and then select this and shift double click on that, and again shift right mouse click extrude face and pull that out in front and get that piece going, something like that. Yeah, and as I mentioned with so many of these, take a double check on your proportions. This is looking longer to me and maybe not as much height in this distance, and this is kind of taller. So I think it'd be sort of shorter and longer than it currently is. And also, I think you don't have this flat section between this corner and there, that this corner meets this corner. So you've got kind of that extra flat surface there. And the pool hall is looking very narrow, so I think you'll want to make that wider. So yeah, some proportional fixes first, and then start adding in the detail. Next up is Jonathan, and yeah, good start on this one. I can see that you paid attention to how the steps kind of narrow towards the front, so you've got that angle in there and on the top piece, which is good. Just trying to put those guys in as well. Take it, look at some of these details here. Obviously, a lot of doors and windows to punch in. Look out through this gap here. It looks like you've got pretty good sized gaps, so try to close that up. And of course, cutting in all the windows, window frames, all that kind of stuff, all that detail. These columns look not like cylinders, but like elongated cubes with some of this additional, thickness at the top and detail and thickness at the bottom. So I would do that instead of a cylinder. And yeah, keep going, keep adding detail. It's a good start, but you definitely got a ways to go. And double check proportions. Look at the height of these cylinders. So look here. Here's the door, and that top deck is just a little bit over the door. There's just a very small distance here, but look at here, look at the top of the door, and look how much distance you've got between there and there. Quite a bit. So take another pass at the proportions. I think the whole thing's maybe a little too tall, and try to get it all proportional to each other before you start adding more detail. Next up is Jackie, and that's the dress shop. So yeah, looks like you've got pretty good proportions to start with. You want to add in the deck. Obviously the window frames and door frames. I understand you haven't done the detail yet, but yeah, I mean, not much to change, I think, at this point. I think it's just a question of going forward. You mentioned about the bay window, and if you have any troubles or questions or want some guidance on that, let me know, and I can give you some advice or demo that. But shouldn't be too scary. So the fundamental shape is going to be, if you just have like a cube, for example. And I'm going to hold down D and V to get point snap and middle mouse drag to that corner, and then I'll hold down V to point snap and get to this front edge, and then I'm going to scale this like so and like so, and then thicken this out a little bit, and then I guess my point is that that's sort of the basic shape to it. That there, and obviously there's a lot more detail. I've went way too thick here. And then you need that top piece and all the rest, But the point is the basic shape is pretty easy. Next up is Rand, and yeah, this is looking really good. Paid nice attention to the proportions. You've already got a lot of detail in there, including these benches and this bench. Think, now it's mostly a question of just more refined detail. You even got these guys in there, which is great. Looks a little narrow to me, I think. If you think that, to me it more looks like that door maybe is in the center and there's a window on that side, so you have the door itself is kind of narrow and then there's no room for anything on the other side, so I think that could be wider in that direction. Yeah, and same with this, it looks just sort of narrow. And I think the just this planks of the bench could be a little thinner. There's a little more detail to work with on the edge here, and look at some of the detail on the columns. Try to add some just irregularity in there. It can look nice. I might, for that, these are separate pieces, but that's not too big a deal. But if I wanted to add some detail, I might do Mesh Tools, Multicut tool, and hold down Control and add a few cuts here, and that kind of thing. And then I might grab some verts, and if I hit B, it'll do soft select. I'm just going to hold down B and click and drag and get a larger area, and then I can sort of bend that up like so and get some of that damaged look to it, and then look for maybe other little areas to, I might have gone too far, but other little areas to add some, there's like a bump here and a dip there, and just little imperfections that kind of help bring it to life and make it not look so geometrically perfect. But and this is a bit long, this piece compared to this piece here, it's a bit long. So take a look at some of the portions, but mostly good. And yeah, start adding some detail. Last up is Santiago, and this one's just great. Really above and beyond here. Just loads of nice detail already. You've got these individual boards already that make this thing up. This is even a That's not even in the original design. It's just like a bonus kind of thing there, which is cool. You can add the saloon sign in. You've got these individual columns here. Might say those are a little shorter and thinner than you have them proportionally. Um, some nice detail on these columns. Look at the shape in there. How you have it squared off at the top and then rounded. That's not a simple thing to do. And yeah, look at the bar doors with the slats. So loads of just detail, and obviously you're relatively advanced for this class. Um, but that's good to have that around. Look for detail you can add, like in the deck. Maybe it's a little thinner, and maybe there's some little bits there. And what else? You could put in transparent windows and add in curtains if you want to take this kind of to the next level. But already this is great. This is really above and beyond expectations.